Welcome to the Liberty Show. Boy, it's been a long time since we've been on, and we have Emily joining us tonight and Ron Cenkush.
Hello, everyone.
Founding member of the Liberty Show. Now, Ron was a former, you ran for Congress for the Libertarian Party. What year was that?
2016?
Yeah,
right? Okay,
2016. It was.
Yeah.
So I didn't put the year on the magnet over there. We got a magnet on the fireplace. But we just thought we'd bring the Liberty Show back, maybe not on a frequent basis or a regular basis, but make shows occasionally as they kind of make sense or as we feel motivated. And it is June 2020, and there's a lot going on. I mean, if you would have asked us 4 years ago if the world would have been in lockdown, and we may have talked about that and then said, it's just a conspiracy theory. And here we are. So Ron, tell us a little bit about, since the last time you were on, you ran for Congress. How did that go? What was your experience with that? What did you learn? What did you...
Well, it went largely about the way most libertarian campaigns go, sadly, which means, I got about somewhere between 3 and 4% of the vote. Got about 10,000 votes district-wide, which is, I figure, pretty good because there's no way in the world I know 10,000 people. So it was some people who voted for me that I don't even know. So I guess, better than just my friends and family plan, which might have been about 30 votes if I was lucky. So, but I had an opportunity to debate at least the Democratic candidate. And, I felt that it was a pretty strong performance. I saw a lot, there were only about 50 people in the audience during the debate. And I only knew a few of them. I think you guys were there, if I remember right.
Yep,
but I saw a lot of heads nodding to a lot of the things I had to say there. And, and I'd hope that maybe that was true also in the audience that listened. But, sadly, at the end of the day, not much has changed about people's willingness to vote outside the general two-party system. And, there's still a lot of the wasted vote syndrome that you hear and, flat out fear of people. They fear one of the other two parties so much, because they've done a masterful job. The one thing they've done a masterful job of that you have to give them credit for is making their opponents look like the worst scare on the planet to their supporters, right? And so many people are just petrified of the other guy winning that they couldn't possibly risk voting for a third-party candidate.
What would you say to someone now, considering we're now in another election year, who says, wasted vote. That's a libertarian vote is a wasted vote. What would you say?
Well, I would say that I think that argument gets harder and harder to defend every single year that goes by. Yeah. When across the spectrum, across the political spectrum, we're less and less happy with government. To be honest, some are less happy because they don't think it's doing enough. Largely, we disagree with them as libertarians. Some are unhappy because they're doing too much. But nevertheless, dissatisfaction seems to be on the rise. And yet, we still face an uphill battle, and I wish that weren't true. And we'll have to see if this election around gives us better numbers or whatever. I hope for an uptick. I hope for an uptick every single time, but we haven't really largely had that yet. So,
am I in the shot still, champion?
Part of your arm's cut off.
This arm?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good.
It'd be scary if it was the other arm.
That's why I was afraid. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute here. Now, Ron, when we talk about libertarians, there's the libertarian philosophy, and then, of course, there's the Libertarian Party. And we were talking before camera now, with everything that's going on, this could be a libertarian moment, whether it's the party or not, meaning less government. And so how do you think, are people going to be, with everything that's going on, in your opinion, are they going to be so afraid that they're going to want government to protect them, or are some people going to start seeing what we've seen with the shutdown, for example?
Well, interestingly enough, it's sort of an interesting dichotomy there, right? Because if you want to talk about stereotypes or typical left policy, left-wing policy, largely these would be pro-government people, right? Mm-hmm. Saying that the government is a tool, a force for good, and we'll harness it and we'll make it do these wonderful things. But yet the militant arm of the government, which, let's face it, any government that lays down rules is completely ineffective without a force to enforce those rules, aka in our society, the police, right? So now the left has this big pushback against that organization, right? The teeth of the organization, right? And so all of a sudden they must, I hope they're asking themselves, do I really think large government is a great idea if I don't approve of its agents, hunting me down in the street and taking my rights away from me, right? I mean, so hopefully it creates that, but yet they do, not just them, lots of people really across the whole political spectrum think that the government should take the lead in the coronavirus fight, and protect me from the virus and set policy to help me from the virus and pay my salary so I don't have to go to work because of the virus and so on and so forth, right? So there's kind of a dichotomy there. On one hand, they sort of are, but on the other hand, they sort of aren't, right? Based on the issue. And so I think, again, as always, we face a bit of a struggle with our message because it's, I think it's just human nature to say, well, look, this is happening and I like that, so that's good. And maybe kind of not pay attention or close attention or sort of ignore the things that go along with it that aren't so good, right? Letting the lesser of two evils or whatever mentality reign. And so it's interesting to see if we'll get enough deep thought and conversation about these issues to get to a place where we do have a bigger liberty moment, where people are understanding that freedom can help, that freedom can help solve the tensions between us, that we can have our cake and eat it too in a lot of cases. If the government wasn't the one deciding whether or not you needed a mask on, right, then libertarians would, I would think, mostly agree, although we don't agree on much from day-to-day basis. But I think largely I would say we would agree on property rights being the thing that would drive it. So if you were the owner of the grocery store, Steve, and you said, look, I'm convinced that masks are important and I think they're going to keep my customers safe. I'm going to ask that my employees wear them, and I'm going to ask that people who shop in my store do, then Ron Cenkush, grocery shopper libertarian, may disagree with that, right? May not like that, but would recognize your property rights and say, hey man, if I'm going to go in Steve's store, he said I have to have a mask, right? But yet, if Emily had a store down the street and she didn't, and maybe I wanted to shop there better, I could go there. So again, we can live in a world where we don't have to have the government, controlling and deciding everything for us, because we don't agree as people. I mean, if there's one thing we can agree on, could it be that? Yeah. Could it be that we don't all agree on how we should live our lives and the things that we should do?
Well, and that we don't have the right to tell another person how to live their life.
That's right. And so, hopefully they'll see that the libertarian message is the one that it won't fix the coronavirus. It won't stop racial inequality. It won't stop hatred in people's hearts. But it will create the environment that will allow us to avoid it or stay away from it or choose better for ourselves, right? And choose to ignore the bad and embrace the good.
How did, we'll cover a couple of these topics, but how has government made the coronavirus, in your opinion, how has it made it worse, the crisis?
Well, I think when you start to get your hands around the term essential business, right? This starts to be very troublesome for me because now the whole heart of freedom is the free market, right? Without property rights, without the ability to own something, without the ability to produce and consume goods as you see fit, you really don't have much freedom, right? And so, the antithesis of a free market would be a government-ran market, a socialism or communism, where central planning decides these things or retains ownership of government, of what should be private resources. But so when you start going down that path, that's troublesome to me, because you're really going away from free market principles and towards, central planning principles, where somehow the people that we elected now know which businesses should stay open and which should close. And I would challenge that they really don't know that. You can make some arbitrary guess, or you can try to think of what's, in your opinion, important or not, but it may not agree with your neighbor's idea.
Well, in every business, and if anything, we learned that with this lockdown is that all businesses are essential to the families they feed.
Yeah, to the people that work there. Let's right. That's certainly not hard to understand, right?
So that whenever you start cherry picking, who will stay open, who gets locked down, who does this, immediately that falls into authoritarian, communistic.
Yeah,
mess.
That's right. So yeah, very concerned about that, and I think that clearly that's a socialist or a communist type of concept of saying, well, we'll decide whose business is important or not, and which one is allowed to work, and then we don't even really have to go far down the path of, oh, that's okay, we'll just create money out of thin air and pay it to you so that you can stay home and be safe. Look, as much as I like the idea of, trying to avoid catching a disease that can be fatal to some people, certainly, right? I don't have a desire to go out and catch that. I'm not beating the drum or calling my friends to see who's got it so I can hang out with them to get it. You know what I mean? I'm obviously not interested.
COVID parties?
No COVID parties like they used to for smallpox or not smallpox, but for chicken pox. Chicken pox.
Yeah, we don't want smallpox.
Exactly. So,
well, and that's the thing too. With people getting paid, the unemployment went up $600 a week. Everybody's getting some of it. If we weren't getting that, the lockdown would end a long time ago. And we would have found out that this wasn't as dangerous as what.
And the thing is, when you do that, you perpetuate the lie that it doesn't matter, right? That money just. You perpetuate the lie that didn't actually cost money to someone somewhere, right? You're perpetuating the fact that your currency's debased, that it doesn't really have the value that it once did when it was backed by gold and silver. You're just creating it out of thin air. You're ignoring that whole thing, right? And you're just perpetuating the myth that we can just print forever and give. If that's good, why don't just give everybody millions and millions? Just hand it out like candy on Halloween, right? What could be wrong, right? What could go wrong, right?
Well, except you have all this money and nobody's producing anything. I saw on the internet today that they're talking about giving people a $4,000 tax credit to go on vacation. So, okay, you're going to get this $4,000, but what if you can't go anywhere? Because they got the lockdowns in it. But this is government.
Well, that's okay. With $4,000, you can bring a little vacation to you. Maybe build a pool in your backyard with a couple of tiki torches and tell yourself you're in Hawaii.
I think you actually have to go on vacation. Of course, the vacation.
Oh, really? Yeah. Now they would mandate that you actually had to go on vacation with
it. They bought they had to
like a lure.
They had to buy the cruise lines.
Oh boy.
Right.
Okay.
So. See how it all.
Well, if that were the case, they should just send you the cruise tickets.
You're right.
Right.
Well,
right.
Now, in my opinion, we're going to see. Of course, we thought we were going to see the financial fallout much sooner, but I can't see how in the next 12 to 18 months that we're not going to see some kind of financial crisis because of everything that they did. We're seeing shortages now because things aren't being produced because people aren't working, they got money, but there's got to be consequences to all this debt. At some point, you can't suspend the laws of economics forever.
At some point, this will end up in inflation, and we're going to sound like a broken record when we say that because we keep saying it, but the fact of the matter is, it's been happening. Look how much a car costs today versus 10 years ago versus 20 years ago versus 30 years ago. Even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's just going to get worse, and people act like that's no big deal, but inflation is an incredible tax. And it's the worst tax against anybody who's trying to save any sort of capital or money to get ahead in life, because you're lucky if you're going to get 2 or 3% interest return from a banking institution or something on an investment of a CD or right if you're right. Yeah. But then inflation is taking it much higher rate than that, and so you're literally putting your money in a place where it's losing its value, and when you go to pull it out, you'll have less buying power than you did when you put it in. And so that discourages savings, right? Which discourages investment in capital, which has ramifications in the economic realm that people don't like to talk about, right? Or think doesn't exist. Yeah.
So we went from COVID to then we've had riots.
Yeah.
And it's been okay to not wear a mask and to be in large groups as long as you're rioting. So
right.
How has government made things worse? And what would have been a libertarian solution?
Well, look, we as a party, we as libertarian philosophers, people even before the LP was actually a political party, people who have been libertarian or libertarian-minded have been saying for a very long time that we have too many laws in general, right? And that we're trying to legislate morality, we're trying to legislate the economy, we're trying to legislate every single thing we can think of. We're now somehow we think that we can use government to eliminate racism, because somehow it can get into your brain like a worm and pull it out and fix you forever, right? Because we passed some policies, And so this is what largely people have been asking for some time. So we've created all these laws, and then the police have to be the people who enforce these laws, because like I said before, you can't have all these laws on the books without some sort of enforcement. Otherwise, they're a joke, and everybody will just laugh at them. That's not a law. What are you going to do? Put me in jail? Obviously, you have to have these ramifications to support them. So in doing that, you create a police force that has to be the SWAT team to eliminate racism, to eradicate drug use, to do everything under the sun. Everything, right? We're asking them to fix the planet because we passed a law. We've fixed the drug problem because we passed a law, and we put cops out there to beat you up if you want to use them. So on to the next, we fix that. What can we fix tomorrow? You know what I mean? All we have to do is write it down on paper and it's magically fixed. So we have contributed to this problem of the police, doing what they do, right? Because we've asked them to do way too much, right? I think the initial small government idea was that, police are the people who protect your rights from people that were trying to take them away from you. The ones who would show up when somebody wouldn't leave your property when you asked them to leave. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Somebody that would, you would call when they stole your bicycle and hopefully get it back for you because someone had violated your property rights and stole from you. And when they did this job, I think is when, probably the pinnacle of people's respect and admiration for the police was, when they functioned in those capacities, when they do those kinds of things.
They were in limited capacity.
Limited capacity, right. And so, now we've asked them to fix everything under the sun, and then that's a very hard job to do, right? And so they use force. That's the tool on their tool belt. That's the other thing. Let's make no mistake. You're not a social worker. You're not a paramedic. You have a gun and a taser and pepper spray and a baton, right? That your tools of the trade are force, and they are designed to use against people who are unjustly using force against others. That's the only time that force like that is truly justified. But now you have to use it to fix social problems, right? And to do every other thing under the sun. And so what are the tools on their belt?
And they've
tools of
become
violence.
more and more militarized.
They have.
So those tools on the belt have become kind of like an internal standing army.
That's right.
And
it's the cops have become more militarized. Obviously they're not making friends by enforcing all these rules, and there's in the communities there's that there's not there's a negative feeling towards because of that. But yet the government is funding. The government is the one that puts the profit in the drugs.
Right.
Because anything that's a black market then
That's right.
becomes profitable.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we talked about it. I'm sure we did a Liberty show on the war on drugs before. At least we've talked about it as a topic. I mean, really, literally, we have an example in our own country's history from many years back that proves just exactly how bad this policy is, and it was prohibition of alcohol. Right, a disaster by almost anyone's means. Ask a Democrat today what they think of prohibition. Ask a Republican what they think of prohibition. One of the few times you're likely to get agreement that it was a failed policy, a ridiculous idea. It couldn't be enforced. It couldn't be. All it did was create more violence and more gang violence and territories. And if there's a demand, it's going to be met, right? There's a market. That's how markets work. When there's a demand for a product, somebody's going to find a way to get the product to you. If you're making your living that way, now you're flying in the face of the police, And so creating a police force doesn't eliminate the market. It just drives it underground. And then they have to protect, dare I say, they feel they need to protect their business. Like you would protect your business if it were something that was legal that you were selling.
And
like,
you can't take them
ice
to court.
cream.
You can't take them to court and call the police, so you have to have your own enforcement.
And so we know from history what a horrible policy it was. And also interesting about that, I know we mentioned it before, but you had to have a constitutional amendment at one point in time to make alcohol illegal, right? But then somehow a government agency just conscripted it into law, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like versus a constitutional amendment. And we also had to have a constitutional amendment to redact it, right? To say, wait, that was a bad idea. Holy cow, let's stop this prohibition of alcohol thing and set the record straight and, get it out of here, right? And so, but then the war on all the rest of the drugs just came at a pen stroke, right?
So no one learned anything.
Right. I mean, again, this kind of dovetails it back in and brings it into today. And so the problems we see is that the war on drugs was largely amped up and I wouldn't say created, it existed before Nixon, but certainly put into overdrive by Nixon, who admittedly used it to target his political opponents, he used it to target hippies who were smoking pot during the Vietnam War and blacks that were involved in the Black Panther movement and civil rights movements and things like that. And so those were political opponents of his. And there was a commission, he did a study, right? You've heard about the study that he did. He asked his own people to go out and do a study about marijuana and give him policy recommendations, and his own people that he commissioned the study said, you should probably just make it legal. And he was furious, right? and so he went in and fired them or whatever, and went ahead with the war on drugs. And
well, this is also that example perfectly illustrates why one cannot believe published studies, scientific studies, because you always have to follow the money.
Yeah.
Who sponsored it? Who's funding it? How politicized is it?
Right.
Everything is. And so
yes,
it kind of anymore. I mean, there used to be a time I remember being able to listen to NPR or something like that and think, okay, this is reliable information. I can use that. Okay, well now none of it is.
Right.
And they're changing their minds all the time. I get conflicting articles. Well, this happened, but it's not really this. It's this, and I'm like, I'm done.
Yeah, it's not a conflict of interest that the scientists that are putting their name on the climate change bills are government funded. They get their studies funded by the government.
Right.
And so the government, their conclusions somehow match what the politicians want to do.
Happen.
And then if you're a scientist who isn't funded that way and you rebut that or come up with other scientific data to counteract it, then you're some kind of a subversive, a kook, whatever, and so, because you got to get on board with the program, you have to be, whatever the case is, you have to be on board with the system, right? Ultimately. So again, all the laws that were passed, the trying to do too much with the law, whether you think it's good, bad, or indifferent, you have to have this police force to enforce it. And then when they're out there overstepping their bounds, and doing things that they shouldn't be doing, we scratch our heads and wonder why, but yet we created it. And sometimes we asked for it. We don't forget that when I say we, it may not be the three people at this table, but we collectively elected those people and voted, and in many cases voted them back in office after they have, passed these horrible laws.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing too, I mean, and I'm not, believe me, I'm not defending rioters or anything like that. They shouldn't have been. The response to what happened doesn't mean you start destroying businesses and
right.
hurting people that had nothing to do with it. But they've destroyed cities and neighborhoods with, and they've gone after the most vulnerable with the welfare programs by incentivizing people not to work. Then there's the minimum wage laws that would, without the minimum wage laws, employers could hire more workers, people could get entry-level jobs, learn skills, and move up in the system.
That's right.
So they don't have those opportunities, but yet because of the black market and because the drugs are illegal and there's a black market, there's a high profit margin. They're like, well, hey, if I'm going to make money, where am I going to go?
Yeah, and I mean, whether or not you think these laws were crafted with the intent of keeping minorities down is kind of irrelevant. At the end of the day, there's much evidence to show that that's what's happening in many cases. Mm-hmm. So, we can have a debate on whether or not this was somebody's master plan or it was happened by accident, but that doesn't change the fact that it's happened, right? And that we have too many laws on the books, and this leads to the situation we have today. Mm-hmm. And libertarians have been saying that for a very, very long time. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, we'll put the dots together and start to see that more widespread in the community. I hope that is true, but
well, there's that T-shirt which I have. I should have wore it. Libertarians want to, get in office, rule the world, and then leave you alone.
Yeah, take over the government so we can leave you alone. Yeah,
right. But the other parties aren't like that. So it's that famous saying where the government will come and break your leg and then give you a crutch saying that they're helping you out. And that's really what we're seeing here with COVID, with the riots, and all the social unrest. I mean, this just didn't happen in 2020, but this is all these policies that have come up.
Yeah.
Now, there was this is back, maybe you weren't part of this. No, I think you were, this is before we knew you, but I think you know of this. The John Birch Society put a video out, Overview of America.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
And one of the things that they talked about is to create chaos, and then so the strong man or the dictator could come in. What is your opinion? I mean, do you think that there's some groups now that are seeing this? Are they trying to do a socialist takeover within our country? I mean, are you seeing some groups with the chaos, with either the COVID or with the riots, or kind of a combination? Are you seeing something here is this sort of the end of America as we know it?
Well, let's not forget that the politicians themselves have said, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So whether they're the ones that manufactured it, or if it just came out organically or just happened, right? There's always somebody looking to capitalize in one shape or another over someone else's misfortune or some other misery, right? So whether or not there's a grand scheme for it and there's a puppet master pulling all the strings, I don't know, because I'm not that connected on the planet. I don't have the ability to know that. You're
in for Congress. Come on.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't lie to people and tell them that I knew things that I didn't. Right.
Yeah.
And so here, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, you can speculate about that, and I can certainly see why people would speculate that way. But if you're asking me if I would think that, it's hard, because I just don't have any way to say that or prove that. And the last thing I would like to do is to go on record and say, oh yeah, that's definitely happening, but not be able to point even one instance of who was actually doing it or show one shred of information. So it's a tough place for me to go and comment on that. I mean, but I will say, definitely short of that whether or not it's a master plan or organic, I guarantee you that they're all huddling up and trying to find just exactly the best way out of this for them, or whatever it is that
so
they want to push to the end.
It may not be a puppet master, but they're seeing it, hey, this is the opportunity to remake things how I want to do it. Don't let that crisis go to waste.
I can't imagine that there isn't a Democrat or Republican politician who isn't doing that at this moment in time.
And we suffer because it's the divide and conquer, whether it's between the race. Everything's polarized now, whether it's black and white, Republican, Democrat. The virus thing, I mean, you've seen it on social media. The Democrats think that Trump did this.
Right.
And
the Republicans think China did it.
And China did it. You're right.
Or that there's the mask wearers versus the non-mask wearers. There's the people who care for people, and then the selfish, evil people.
Again, there's a lot of intolerance, really, in the world in a lot of ways. Like some of it's so plain and so easy to see as pure intolerance, all in of itself, and then but there's just so much of it that's so much more subtle. Right? Like the crowd who says, "Oh my goodness, you're not wearing a mask. You know, you need to be stopped. You need to be apprehended. You need to be jailed. You need to be concentration camp re-educated. You know, you got a problem, man. You're not wearing a mask, right? You know, so again, in the scenario I talked about earlier about how we can agree to disagree and move forward, and we can take the things. And look, man, here's the thing that people don't realize: if we start just agreeing to disagree more and kind of doing our own things a little bit more, if it becomes really clear that one way is so much better than another, then I think many people are just going to gravitate to that. Like, why wouldn't they, right? But you didn't have to do it through force, right? You didn't have to put their elbow behind their back and push them into it, right? You know, they're going to gravitate to it if they clearly see that it's better. But, you know, we're trapped in a system where everyone wants to do everything at the federal level because there can be no resistance, there can be no opposition, there can be no other state of mind or other idea, right? It only has to be done this way, and that's it. And it has to be, since that's true, it has to be done at the federal level and shoved down every single citizen's throat. And this isn't really necessarily a tenet of libertarianism. And in fact, there's a lot of libertarians who would really not chime in with me in this statement that I'm about to make. But if we just started getting away from doing everything at the federal level and let states decide more for themselves which way they wanted to go, more of us could be happy. And we wouldn't even necessarily have to be happy about the same things.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you could go to a state where they didn't allow or tolerate something that you can't stand, right? But if I love that, I could go to a state where it was tolerated, right? And we didn't have to go to war over it. No nuclear weapons have to be launched. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't have to fight each other. But when we make all of this stuff federal level stuff, there's no other way but conflict. There's no other there's no place to turn, right? There's no place to say I disagree without going to jail. You know what I'm saying?
Or going to war.
Or going to war.
Yeah.
And so, and again, there's a lot of people would say, well, that's just tyranny at the state level, and that's just too much government. Some libertarians would say that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I get it. Like, to a certain extent, I get that. But I'm also, it's not so much that I'm advocating is that's like the only thing we should do. I'm just kind of making a statement that if we only did that, we all kind of stand the chance of being happier.
Right, because if Michigan got really bad, you could just say, hey, I'm going to move to Indiana. That's
right, and vice versa. Yeah. And in some ways, we are kind of doing this. We're doing it with marijuana right now. You know, some states are saying, you know, they're bucking the federal government. You know, they're actually placing themselves in conflict with the federal government by saying we're not going to criminalize it anymore. We're going to legalize it in our state. You know, but there's an example of it working, right? You know, Indiana isn't hopped on the bandwagon. It doesn't appear to be anywhere close to it, you know, of legalizing marijuana, right? But yet Michigan has, and they're right across the border.
Right,
so I mean, if that from here where we sit, like they're almost literally across the street, right? Yeah. So you could just move there if that were the biggest thing to you, and vice versa. You know, if you found yourself in Michigan and you thought that was the worst policy move that they'd ever made, and you were angry about it, just seeing red. you could sell your house and move to a state where it isn't. And I mean, and all people could, in that case, live happily ever after, And yet we could still also have a mutual defense pact where we said if anybody attacked any of us from the outside, we would still defend you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because there used to be a time in this country where a lot of people would say things like, I don't agree with the thing you say, but I'll defend your right to say it. That was kind of a very common thing that people said. And it was sort of a feeling, and it was an understanding at one point that we all weren't going to see eye to eye on things.
We were
but it wasn't the worst thing ever, right? Like we found a way to move on and exist and raise a family and love our children and produce in society. We found a way to move forward, right? But now we're in a dangerous spot because we feel like somehow there's only one right path and everyone has to be on it, but no one agrees on what the path is. So we're all not going to be on it at some point. Like everybody's going to be off the path on something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's very dangerous. I think it's dangerous.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Libertarian Party, but as I'm kind of thinking this, I don't want to make it unfair to you because you're not a spokesman for the party. You're a member of the party, and I even asked you, I said, hey, Ron, let's talk a little bit about the Libertarian debates. You're like, I didn't watch them. So,
yeah, we're going to let the whole public know that I didn't watch the debates.
I can edit this out.
I should have watched them. Let me go on record.
You want me to edit this out?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and leave it in. I'm good with it. My mea culpa is right here. I'm sorry. I should have been better prepared. I should have watched them. To be honest, I've just been a little bit. Run down by the state of the world recently. And
I understand that.
I've been I was slightly underwhelmed with our field. I don't think there's anything really too terribly wrong or that I disagree with any of the candidates that are in our field. I was a little disappointed that we didn't have someone who I thought would get more press or attention. And I think our ideas are important. I think they're good and that people need to hear them more. And so I would really like our presidential candidate to be someone who I think has a chance to convey them, to reach people. And I was afraid that in the field that we had, I didn't think we had someone that was going to excel in that out of the entire field. And I was a little disappointed about that. So I kind of got to this spot, maybe you call it like a feel sorry for yourself, or I don't know what you can label it anything you want. But I kind of got myself to the spot where I said, well, it doesn't matter which one of them wins because none of them are going to get any kind of press that will get them in front of anyone.
And Andy Horning was sort of like that, and then he got excited when Amash got in, and I wasn't excited just because, I'm not, some of us, they'll call us purists, but it's not like, I want this absolutely pure message, but you got to be able to convey it somewhat. But I will say this for Jo Jorgensen, she's not a newcomer. I guess she's been in the party for 4 years.
Much longer than that.
40 years, sorry.
Oh, okay,
40,
yeah.
40 years. I said 4 years. Yeah, times 10.
Okay.
Times 10. But, I mean, if you look at her page, she's good on some issues, libertarian principles. Now, as far as getting the message out there, I don't like to play the gender card or the race card, but this map might work to her advantage that she's the woman now in the race, and you have two polarizing figures of the men that some people just might interview her just because she's the woman in the race, and that might be and she's a grounded libertarian, so she's not. So when she does give interviews, she is going to.
So do you think that the other two candidates might be labeled as misogynist if they didn't allow Jo into the debates? Is that kind of where you're going with that, or?
Yeah, they might play that up in the press a little bit.
Well, except
I don't think that you will because because Jo doesn't bring anything the media likes.
Yep.
Okay, that's true.
That's right.
If Jo brought something that the media really loved, I guarantee you they would come with that message and they would come hard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
But they won't.
But sadly, I don't think Jo brings anything to the plate that the media is too happy about.
The media is bought by Republicans.
Yes.
So they don't want Jo anywhere near them.
Right.
On anything. Which is all the more reason to watch Jo.
Right.
Now the vice presidential candidate, and for people that don't know how the Libertarian Party works, in the other two parties, the presidential nominee will pick his vice president. And so when the party picks the president, he says, okay, here's who I'm choosing for vice president. Libertarians totally different. Each run on their own.
That's right.
So Joe didn't pick Spike Cohen.
Right.
Now Spike, I had listened to him, and boy, he was really good on some libertarian issues. And here's where I want to talk about some of the branding and stuff. And he was on Tom Woods, and he's talking about ending the Fed and the wars and all of this stuff. And then he's like, yeah, and we're going to protect sex workers. I'm like, okay, you want to be relatable, you don't want to scare people away. Now, I understand that as far as like limited government, and then there is the unintended consequences and all of this stuff. But sometimes they make it sound like that they're promoting. The average person would say, stop right there.
I'm done because
you're promoting this.
Right.
Where the marketing on it could have been like, hey, we want to get rid of nonviolent crimes. If we got the biggest...
Or victimless crimes.
Victimless crimes, yeah. So you're not going to get into some of the details on that to scare people away. And then Spike also... So I don't know Spike's background at all, but then he got on this... Gay Pride Month thing, which then I'm thinking, okay, if you start reading his articles, he's talking about, well, when the government would jail people and beat people up and destroy their businesses and all that stuff. Okay, yeah, that's not the role of the federal government. But you really got to kind of read into what he's saying. Average person isn't going to do that.
So you're thinking that perhaps he's not really reaching the general public with the message that is important. You think they're seeing just a side of it, or he's not doing a very good job of saying why that was so bad.
Because we're
right?
Christians, we're Christians, and so I took a look at that as like, okay, he's promoting that. Okay, now how am I going to? And then I had to really stop and think and read into it. The average person isn't going to do that. They're just going to go boom. They're going to dismiss. And then I'm thinking, how can I, that's not a battle that I want to fight, trying to promote these candidates.
No, it's probably going to be pretty hard for you, isn't it?
Right.
My guess is going to be hard to walk into church on Sunday and explain to the congregation there why prostitutes should not be illegal, right? You're saying that's a tough crowd. Mm-hmm. I kind of get that.
Yeah.
I do. No, I get it. It needs no further explanation.
Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that I can say a whole lot to defend it or to shed different light on it, other than this one thing that pops in my mind, and maybe this will help and maybe it won't. But I'm pretty sure that in the early '80s when the Republicans were really, with Reagan kind of reamping up the drug war again with Nancy's "Don't Say No" program, and
say no,
or don't just say no.
Just
I'm sorry.
Say no.
Yeah,
Wait,
it was a different Nancy that was saying "Don't say no." She never made it into the annals of history. But Nancy Reagan was saying yes. Yeah. Just say no. My bad. I was thinking of the other Nancy. No one knows her. Anyway, so the thing is that when the Libertarian Party was back then talking about how the government shouldn't be involved in the drug war, I mean, we did catch a hell of a lot of backlash for that. Mm-hmm. And they were labeled, idiots and morons and degenerates and everything under the sun. In fact, check out the Ron Paul on the Maury Povich show clip. Have you seen
I
this?
did see that, yeah.
Oh my goodness. People in the audience are just incensed, angry at him. Tell him how angry it's a spectacle, because he's suggesting that, we should end the war on drugs or whatever. And, he's a Martian, an evil Martian at that, not even a good one. Right. And people the whole audience is like a mob, it was like that close to them rushing the stage and beating him up. I'm not exaggerating.
That clip was crazy.
So, I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that you have to. There are different tactics. That's all I can say. Clearly, there are different tactics. If you think you're on the verge of winning the election, and you honestly believe we're just 50 votes away from winning this thing, I really got to tread lightly on the eggs. You know what I'm saying? Maybe your strategy is a lot more toned down. Maybe you're not going to mention those uncomfortable things. You know what I'm saying? Maybe if you think you're honestly close to winning, maybe you should take a different strategy, right? But sadly, we're still in a place where we're not that close to winning yet.
Well, yeah, but and
so
we know that. But the point is to grow the party a little bit each time.
It is.
Yeah.
But we came out of that and grew, though it was something that people found repugnant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they were so angry, and now pretty much they all agree with us.
I will say the difference. I will say the difference between the two movements is that the Pride movement didn't stop with just making things legal. It's like now they brought in the transgenderism, and we need to start. They're pushing for that to be taught in school. They didn't have high parades where, hey, we're going to go out and march down the street and I'll be high and show everybody.
Sorry, I just have to say this. I thought we were talking about sex work.
Well,
not so much the gay pride.
Well, I was kind of putting it all together because I did say the gay pride too. I
misunderstood.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's okay.
The thing, to be clear, the thing I was trying to say was I was trying to draw the lines of parallel between the two. That at one time that marijuana legalization was, oh my goodness, how could you?
Right.
You know, it was poo-pooed by lots of society. There were even like 20-year-old guys on there angry at Ron Paul, and I'm thinking, really?
Well,
yeah.
And the drugs and the sex are combined because a lot of the sex workers are that to buy their drugs, the drugs are.
I think that's probably a stereotype, but I mean it may have some. That's
what we do here.
That's not what we do.
We don't.
I use my sex work money to buy comic books. I don't know what you guys use it for, but I don't touch drugs at all. Not one bit.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Of course, the problem is I haven't made any money from my sex work because I don't have any comic books. Is the problem to show for it? But if I did, I would spend them on comic books. Right.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman.
Among others.
Okay.
Not just.
Okay. Not just Wonder Woman. But and my point too with what Spike has done is he's making it sound like he's into supporting a group instead of individual rights, and libertarians always try to sell it on the point of individual rights, and he's talking about a group, and then Amash, I think there was a Supreme Court decision with the Civil Rights Act, and now they're including the sexual orientation and all that stuff, which the government shouldn't discriminate against, but they're not drawing the line. The libertarians aren't drawing the line between private property. Gary Johnson even did that. I would force a cake baker. And
actually, he never said that. He never said he would force them to. Okay. He was speaking in terms of advice. His advice to them was bake the cake. He didn't say, I would support legislation that would force them to bake the cake. And when asked to clarify, that's exactly what he said.
I thought he did in the debate because we were at your house watching it.
No, he said, they asked him, what are your feelings on this? And he said, bake the cake. And then he thought he was suggesting that was advice. Mm-hmm. People thought he was talking about that should be the law.
Okay.
When they asked him later, he clarified it and said, obviously, I'm not going to support legislation, but my advice to you is make money. You're in business to make money. Somebody wants you to bake him a cake. Mm-hmm. That was his advice, right? Mm-hmm.
And let the free market work.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, if you have a business, you are don't want to, actually, like we said before, with mask wearing, and I will go to businesses that, don't make people wear masks because.
So I think it's pretty clear in Libertarian Platform, right, where we all get together and hash out what we want to say to the world and what we want them to see from us. Yeah. I think that we've done a pretty good job of accurately describing that in the platform, right? Our candidates sometimes fall short of perfection. If they're human beings, clearly. Even our platform can be chiseled and worked. It's a working document. We change it every year, make some small changes or change language or verbiage. So, to say that it's always spot on or whatever is not correct. And then, again, when you start going into individual candidates, they have some wiggle room. We're not some organization that is going to stomp on their head for.
Well, the Libertarian Party doesn't have a big PR like the big.
It doesn't. We don't have the giant PR engine. You're right. That's another good point. We don't have somebody dwelling on every possible word and choosing for our candidates very specifically what they say. They're not scripted, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like the other people are. And their talking points or whatever, that's all the other ones ever say. That you ask them another question and they're like, well, like I said before on education, they're like, I'm talking about gun control. What I said is we had education and, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Like this is what they do and everyone knows it. And our guys aren't that polished or scripted and we don't have that kind of funding to support that. So,
I'm glad.
we never get it all right, and even if we do, we never get it right enough for everyone. Let's be honest. Like it's hard to please everyone, and so I can't sit here and defend some of the things that some of our candidates have said that that you thought could be said different or whatever, or flat out just disagree with. I mean, I can't really. Really defend that.
Yeah, and when I made that comment too on Facebook, you're like, "Oh no, what did we do now?" But
because I always get lumped in. Like I feel like since I've been the county chair for so long here, of course we're almost. I think we're kind of not officially, but kind of disbanded at the moment. We don't have enough people interested to do anything. But I guess somehow I feel like I'm part of the machine. Like I've assimilated into the Borg with them or whatever. So when anybody ever says, the Libertarians did this, a little bit, I guess I kind of internalized that. I guess you're talking about me because I'm the guy. I'm that guy.
That's all you are.
Right.
No,
so,
but
and I probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard.
It is. I understand.
Yeah.
Well, explain to our audience because we are going to put this on the Prophecy Brothers too because it's a crossover stuff. Explain why you can't legislate morality and what's unintended consequences of that.
I think the very biggest danger to that, and I hope one that, cross my fingers, one that I hope the Prophecy Brothers audience will agree with me on, dare I say, right? But it's my hope, is that, okay, whose religion are we standardizing on? Whose morals are we standardizing on? Your church's tenets, and are those the ones that are in the majority today? Who's the majority in America tomorrow? And how do those laws change for them? Is it going to be the Rahashnishism, that we talked a little bit before the show about this guy who came over in the 80s and set up his little thing and had a movement going? If that became ultra popular, are we going to match the laws in the land to that, right? Or, so if you were a Christian today and you live in America and you're probably in the majority, I'm thinking, right? I think it's safe to say that the majority of Americans are Christians, whether or not it's our official religion or not. I think it's the biggest in America. That's not a falsehood, is it? Is that true? Does anybody know the facts on that?
That's true, isn't it, Champion?
Well, it's like, nominal Christianity, you'll say, I'm Christian because they go to church on these.
So they identify as Christian.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to misspeak, but
Right.
at least, even if I am somewhat wrong, I know it's pretty good up there, right? I think we can all certainly agree with that. So if we make our laws around the morality, it goes to the level. Well, first of all, there's another sub caveat is, from denomination to denomination, we don't even actually agree on a lot of that. Look, I mean, my wife went to a Church of Christ. And she was telling me about some other churches of Christ and that there were divisions in the Church of Christ. And one of them, just shocked me, was there's a non-instrumental Church of Christ where this was funny to me. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make fun of people's religion. I found it incredible. Like, almost, this can't really be true. They broke off and split from their primary church because some of them thought playing instruments was against God somehow, that there was scripture that said you shouldn't do that, right? And other ones didn't. And I'm like, wait, let me get this straight. Write down the whole doctrine. You're check, right? Down every single thing, right? You're like, now you're on point 6,447, and you've been lockstep on all the ones right down here. And somebody said, well, Jed wants to play the banjo in church on Sunday. And you said, that's it. We're over here and you're over there because we're not having that blasphemy in our church. And I was like, that really happened. And she's like, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was Jeb with the banjo, but I do know that it really happened, right? And so, look, I know that's funny to me, and I'm sorry. I'm just going to go on the record and say that I think that's a little petty, but that's just my opinion. Right. That's just one human being's opinion, right? That and this water gets you the start of a seedling, you know.
I don't know
and again, so being someone who is not really deep in religion, I was raised as a Baptist. I was taken to a Baptist church through about the first 12 years of my life, so I read a good portion of the Bible and been exposed to plenty of things. I don't claim to be an expert by any stretch, but I know a little bit about it. I know a little bit, right? And so, anyway, that I think is the biggest danger. That's why I think we should not use government to legislate morality, because even if it's the right morality, whatever that really is, when it comes down to brass tacks, because Jeb and the banjo isn't moral in somebody's church, and that poor guy is going to go to prison if the non-instrumentalists are running the government. You see what I'm saying here? Mm-hmm. And so I hope that I can reach a sense of understanding with that community, with the Prophecy Brothers audience, when I say that for reasons like that, you shouldn't, because you don't know 6 months from now or 10 years from now or 40 years from now what the predominant religion will be, what those morals will be, right? And secondly, I would say that to a much lesser extent, it's from my understanding of religion and the little bit I was exposed to, that's using the government isn't what Christianity was about anyway. When Christ came here, again, this is based on just a little bit of exposure to the Bible, so I don't claim to be an expert by any stretch, but what I got from those stories were, he didn't take control of the governments when he came. He didn't tell them what to do. He didn't change the laws. He didn't tell them they were wrong. He said, that's not what I'm here to do. So I think it's also clear to me that we have free will as humans. Now, if you're religious and you say God granted us that free will, or you're from the other side of the fence where you can just say, look, I can prove we have free will by scientific experiments, right? Free will exists, I believe. Yeah. I believe we have it. And so because of that, that's probably yet another reason why we should not use. In other words, if Jesus didn't come down and start whack-a-moling people for doing the wrong thing, I'm not sure that we're supposed to.
Well, there was a city too, him and the apostles went in and they wouldn't accept the gospel. And the disciple says, you're going to call fire and brimstone down. And it's like, no, that's not why I came here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So
but it did say in the last days, and they're going to be worse than Sodom and Gomorrah, but it wasn't going to be. That's not why he came down. But,
that's right.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, I hope that I hope that the biggest reason is the one that really resonates, which is the fact of you never really know who's going to be in control in the government and what nuance they will put on these morals that then have to be forced on everyone. Because even my wife, who's much more religious from me, is very concerned about that aspect, right? And I hope that is something that the Prophecy Brothers audience would embrace, but that's up to them, right?
Yeah.
So,
and hopefully this is a just a way. I mean, we're promoting the ideals of less government and individual rights and property rights, and to get that concept. I'm not really promoting a party, but here's the thing: it's like what party really promotes that? Right. I mean, other than the Libertarian Party. I mean, I'm looking at. What Joe is saying, and there's only one candidate that I know that's calling for smaller government.
Right.
So what I think, and I don't know if I said this on camera, but what was refreshing, we had talked about earlier, those debates, they were actually talking about issues, whether you agree with them or not. They weren't. It wasn't the cult of personality and the mudslinging. It was like, here's what we would do, here's what the role of government should be, here's the problems the government's caused, here's how I'm going to fix it. And It was, whether you agreed with it or not, whether some of it is extreme, at least it was some issues.
Right.
So hopefully, I mean, that will continue.
Yeah, I really hope so. And, I look forward to the day when we get a few more people in our area interested in, trying to get something going. Maybe run some candidates again or help with campaigns. I would like to do that again at some point. But over the last few years, we've just seen a lot of disaffect, people turning away instead of turning towards fixing it or whatever. A lot of people are just kind of not wanting to deal with it. It's become so bad.
Why do you think that is?
Well, either it's two-pronged probably, or maybe both of these things with people. They either feel like they can't change it, they don't have enough,
right.
They don't have any way of actually fixing it, or it's a waste of time. There's just not enough critical mass, or they don't see enough effort, for them to throw their support behind it either. And I think those are the two biggest reasons, or they want no part of it. They see. So a lot of things, more than half the people don't vote. Right?
Yeah.
And it's more, I'm sure it's more than a few of them that are just disgusted with it all, that can't stand either of the two major parties and want nothing at all to do with it. They don't want to be implicit into any of that mess. And who can blame them,
Yeah.
So I think those are the reasons why we don't see more. Ironically enough, the path to victory and liberty might be right through those people. I mean, so as much as I'd love Democrats and Republicans to watch the show and say, wow, these libertarians, they really have some decent ideas and maybe freedom can actually work. Maybe I don't have to control my neighbor as much as I thought I did. As much as I'd love that to happen, that's probably a lot less likely than the other people who are now currently not involved in politics hearing our message and saying, gee, we're the ones who actually have to step up and stop this. It's like 10 or 15% of the population that really, really, really embraces and loves liberalism, and it's about 15 or 16% that really embraces and loves conservatism and thinks it's the best thing since sliced bread. And the rest of us are being led around by one of those two ideologies. You know what I mean? And in effect, the other thing that a lot of people never see, and maybe a lot of people that don't vote do see, that it doesn't really matter which one gets into office,
that's
right?
what I was
We end
gonna
up with the
say.
same policies.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Eventually, I mean, again, foreign policy, has it changed in 20, 30 years?
No.
I mean, it's the exact same foreign policy for 30 years through all these different presidents.
And guess who just ran up the biggest debt ever?
Would it be Trump? Just like Obama before him?
Bigger than that, yeah.
Right, yeah,
And I
but
think
I mean, but he had the record,
yeah.
right? Obama had the record until Trump came along.
And this is
now he's
before
got
the
it,
crisis.
right?
Right.
And we had to give money for COVID and everything else,
yeah.
right, to keep the planet afloat. I mean, and now it's a Republican, right? And when the Democrats did that, well, George Bush did it first before he left. Yeah, stimulus package, and Republicans thought that was all right. Then Obama spent a lot of money, and they were just as mad as hornets. And now Trump gets in, and he's spending like there's no tomorrow, and he gets a complete pass for that, because it's my team. It's my team. Well, he's doing the right thing with the money. The other guy didn't do the right thing with the money. Well, look, the right thing
What is that?
exactly. It depends a lot about what seat you're in. You know what I mean? And so when libertarians say, look, you probably should be the one who decides more of the right thing than these guys. And you put your money where you think it'll do the best good. That's a message that I'm hoping will resonate with the folks that don't vote. I don't think it has much of a chance to get to 15% on each side. It just doesn't. They don't care.
No, they don't care.
Well,
Yeah,
and
no,
they're
you're right.
too.
Yeah. They know
the
what's right,
blinders are on.
and they're more than willing to shove it right down your throat.
Yeah.
And no Liberty show is going to reach them. I'm sorry to say.
Probably aren't watching.
It's just not gonna get them, even if they watch.
Even with our ratings.
Even with these ratings.
Okay.
Yeah. Even with this great message.
Right.
It's just not. No message reaches everybody.
No.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Ron, thanks. It was fun doing the show again and talking
Sure.
to you.
It's been a blast.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
And this is going to be a crossover show. Like I say, it's been a few years since we made the Liberty Show, and so that channel's still up, but I'll probably put this on both channels, and who knows, give us some feedback. Give us your thoughts. Tell us
Shout out
right
to
or
the
wrong.
Prophecy Brothers audience. I would say this: if you have questions, right, for me, please get them to the show producers, and I would happily come back another time and try to talk and answer those questions. How's that?
Sounds good.
great.
Okay, great.
All right. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll hope to see you soon.
Good night.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel.